Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show, our Week 12 reaction show. Paul joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler and Zach Bloomquist, the best executive producer in the game. Jack is currently in Auburn right now. He's flying back on Monday morning, and he saw a hell of a game. I mean, just an unbelievable finish to the Iron Bowl this year. Bama finds a way to win, Ziggy. I don't know how they do it, but we're sending texts to each other saying only Bama finds a way on 4th and 31, 4th and 32. And they come away with a huge win.
No, on when they got that sack and made it 4th and 31, because Jack ridiculously picked the Auburn money line as the cap of the week. And I jinxed it like I've never jinxed anything before, because I typed in the chat, like right after that sack that set up 4th and 31 cap hits. Because surely Alabama's not getting a touchdown on 4th and 31.
I was talking to Jack today, and we were saying how he was at this game, I was at Notre Dame, Ohio State, and he goes, only me and you. We're the only two people in the world who would be at the games where you have such a crushing ending like this. And I said, I completely agree with him. Anywhere else in the world, Bama or Auburn's taking knees, Notre Dame's taking knees, game's over. Yet we see two of the more thrilling. When you walk out of a game like that, there is some sort of appreciation for what you just saw as devastating. And I don't want to compare. Look, me walking out of Notre Dame was a completely different level of sadness than Jack walking out of Auburn, who has no affiliation with the school whatsoever. But when you're rooting for those teams and you see that kind of game, still in the back of your mind, you're like, holy crap, you just appreciate how good of a football game it was. So only us. I mean, we are the only freaking people in the world who have our teams lose like that. But
though I don't know. I think there are probably some Buffalo fans in Philadelphia tonight who are feeling the same way.
31. Look, that Bills-Eagles game, that's where we'll start. That's why you're one of the best in the business, Ziggy, at transitions like that. This felt to me like the final blow for Buffalo. For all the ups and downs that we've seen this season, the Josh Allen that we got today is arguably the best player in the world, and I'm including Patrick Mahomes in that conversation. When Josh Allen plays the way we saw in Philly, there are very, very few people who have been better than him in a long time playing football. And given the situation that the Bills are in right now, with the schedule they have, we'll talk about that in a second, to get the Josh Allen you got today and still come up short with all of the chances you had to win, this really felt like the final kick in the butt for Buffalo, where it's okay, you're probably not going to the playoffs this year, which is sad because I want to see Josh Allen in the playoffs. I know producer Zack, Union Zack, is thrilled about this. But Ziggy, watching this game, didn't it just feel like Buffalo had their moment and now they have an impossible task ahead of them?
I think they do. And my prediction is I don't think he's getting fired this week, but I think this is the end of Sean McDermott in Buffalo.
Same.
Besides that Ravens game to go to the AFC Championship, the Bills have generally not won these big games. And it's a shame because they show up, or at least the offense basically always shows up. Josh Allen played incredibly well. And through, I think, what an objective fan would call some pretty unfair officiating, right? There was that missed horse collar tackle into that terrible intentional grounding call. The Eagles players were getting DPI and were doing DPI and holding all night and getting away with it. But even setting that focus aside, it was just tragedy after tragedy for Buffalo.
Yes.
You've got Jake Elliott hit one of the most impressive field goals in NFL history, 59 yards.
I can't believe
in those conditions.
When he set up, Zach and I were watching the game, and I looked at Zach, and you were pretty confident he was going to hit it, I think, because it's always the Eagles. But I sat back and I looked at Zach and said, there's no effing way that this guy's hitting a 59-yarder in a downpour. Dude crushed it. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, you have that. Then you inexplicably decide to kneel the game out rather than giving Josh Allen 20 seconds and 2 timeouts. It was only 1 timeout because they iced the kicker for some reason. But you kneel the game out. Then you win the coin flip in overtime. You have some missed calls, some things go unfortunate. You kick a field goal. And then you've got the Eagles just march down the field to score and the game after some pretty tight conversions. And you're seeing Josh Allen, right? It's 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 every single time. And he's finding ways to convert and move the ball down the field. Meanwhile, you've got Gabe Davis running in the wrong direction.
Oh, that was
there were just so many opportunities for the Bills to win this. And it's tough at a certain point when you've got a quarterback playing this well to not think it's your defensive-minded head coach not being able to get anything right. The defense has given up a bunch of points. Special teams is a disaster. The offense is inconsistent. It just feels like nothing is going right for a team that, by their performances, is one of the best in the NFL.
You're totally right. And the Gabe Davis, it's not a drop or anything. It's just the wrong route. Like, it's just a miscommunication. That play felt to me when he let go of the ball, you saw Gabe running his route, and it looked like, okay, this game's over here. It felt a little bit like the 13-second game touchdown Davis had, where he just ran, a little post route, touchdown. You're walking away what should be a winner. And it feels to me like that 13-second game might be the peak, like the best we will ever see this Sean McDermott team. And at this point, I don't know if they're going to be able to get back with Sean McDermott to playing that level of football all around. That team, I think, would have gone on to win the Super Bowl had they beaten Kansas City. Joe Burrow's Bengals were great. But yeah, maybe we've just reached our ceiling here. And now when you look ahead at the rest of the season, at the Chiefs versus the Cowboys, at the Chargers, you go to Miami, it's impossible for me to see them. This just feels backbreaking. And do you have anything left on Buffalo?
No, it's not about Buffalo. I was going to say something about Philadelphia.
Please.
You know what this Eagles team reminds me of? It feels kind of weird to say this. They remind me of the 2021 Titans, but with an offensive line. Every single week, A.J. Brown somehow finds a way to get the team to win. Right? And I'm not saying the Eagles don't have talent, right? But you look at this team, and it feels like every single week they get some lucky break or another that lets them win. And I get that in the NFL, you have to get lucky breaks to win. But like you look at this game, so many things went their way, right? From the James Cook drop touchdown to random Bills misfires. It feels like this. Yeah, they've had the hardest schedule in the NFL, and they're 10-1 because they just keep finding ways to win. Yeah, I don't know when that's going to run out or if.
I'm only willing to go so far on luck now with these. When there are good teams, a lot of times you say, oh, they get so lucky here and there, but they find ways to win. And I think this was unequivocally an example of who the Philadelphia Eagles have become. They are a tough, hard-nosed, whatever it takes to win football team. I sit back and I watch the Eagles play, and I'm confident in every single game that they're going to find a way to get the job done. On that 3rd and 15 touchdown to, I think it was Zacchaeus, that Hurts rolled out to his left. And in the middle of the play, I'm thinking to myself, he always does this. He's always able to make something out of nothing. It kind of reminded me a bit of Bama and Milroe, where just, you have a miracle play like that, but that's what Alabama does. That's what the Eagles do. And it doesn't matter how unlikely it seems, they're going to find a way to defy the odds. And at this point in time right now, even though they're not blowing out teams the way they did last year, it always feels like Philly is going to win. So hats off to the Eagles. It annoys me because I'm not an Eagles fan at all, but they're good. They find ways.
I'm really excited to see next week. There's only 2 teams in the NFC I'm really confident in. The Eagles and the 49ers. The 49ers have to go to Philadelphia next week. Like you say, Zach, the Eagles, despite having the hardest schedule in the NFL, get every single tough game at home. Nevertheless, I'm excited to see what comes out of that.
That feels like the only team, the 49ers, who can challenge Philly right now to me. Detroit's a little up. We'll get to Detroit in a second. But
I mean, if the Eagles win that game, they're 11-1, and the only competitor for the 1 seed is an 8-4 team they have the tiebreaker over.
There is no competitor. If they win this one.
It feels like this was the game where the Eagles probably locked up the 1 seed, and this was the game where the Bills locked up not winning the division.
Yep. A lot of things felt set in stone from this one.
97%.
The Dolphins?
Yeah,
oh, yeah. You guys should be confident right now.
And if we beat the Commanders, it's 99.
Yeah, so you guys have probably like this. This is why I say, even though it feels you don't want to overreact to one game too much, the Bills really needed to go on a run. And this was an opportunity to do that. And it just feels like this has to be.
Oh, it felt like it could have sparked the run. This felt like if they win this game, no matter how they do it, all of a sudden you say, okay, maybe we can go into Kansas City. Maybe we can go against Dallas at home. They could still possibly win those games, but now in the back of your head, it's like, all right, we got an uphill battle. And 2 of those teams that they are going to have to battle with for a wild card spot, the Browns and the Broncos, Denver wins their 5th straight game now. Over the course of this winning streak, 16 turnovers the Denver defense has forced. Another 3 today against Cleveland. And we keep saying, at some point this has to run out. But at the same time, we mentioned on the last show, maybe this is just an opportunistic Denver defense who is finding ways to make plays. You have those weird moments where DTR, I believe he pitched it back to Kareem Hunt and the ball just bounces off his hands. Like, there are weird fumbles like that. But Denver's finding a way to force opponents into mistakes. And Russell Wilson, to me, he really looks like the old Russ a little bit over these past 5 games, especially when it comes to his mobility. He looked quick today, moving around the pocket, even on some of the runs. We haven't seen that from him in a long time. And what this offense has turned into, where all of a sudden Courtland Sutton, I know he didn't have a huge day, but he's making some big-time catches in big scenarios. Denver, they still have a tough remaining schedule to some degree, where they have the Texans, they have Detroit both on the road. They still go to LA, the Chargers, but they're playing as well as anyone in the league right now. And you have to think that they do control their own destiny here to get to the playoffs. So I've been really impressed with what I've seen from them. And Cleveland, there's just not enough on offense. As great as the defense is, I just can't see them with Walker or DTR having enough. Maybe they sneak in the playoffs, but this is not a threatening team.
Well, we'll see. Myles Garrett, it looks like he might be out for the season. He left the game in a sling and talks about feeling a really painful pop in his right shoulder. And with the way this Browns season is going, if he's in pain and there's a risk of making it worse, you're not playing him. So I think you're right to focus on the Broncos. And watching this defense, it makes me feel like the Broncos from last year a little bit, right? How many times did we say if the Broncos can just score 20 points, they'll win the game?
Yeah.
It would have been 14-3 if the offense could score just 20 points a game or something ridiculous like that. Well, now it's 4 weeks in a row that the Broncos have scored 20 or more points a game. And against some tough defenses too. I get that doesn't sound super exciting, but they faced the Chiefs, the Bills, the Vikings, and the Browns. There's probably 3 top 10 defenses there. All of them are above average. So these aren't bad defenses they're putting these performances up against. And when you compare that to their terrible performances against defenses like, the Raiders and the Dolphins earlier in the season, the Packers, it feels like they've turned the corner a little bit. So when you get an offense and a defense that are starting to believe, that are playing together a little bit, where all the pieces are starting to connect and the offseason vision is coming together, you get a team that can believe in itself a little bit. And increasingly, it feels like these Broncos are starting to believe. And if you believe, you say it's a tough schedule, right? But it's against the Texans, Chargers, Lions, Patriots, Chargers, and Raiders. Those are all winnable games, right? You're not going to Philadelphia and facing the Eagles. You're not going to Cincinnati and facing prime Joe Burrow. Those are teams, each of them has their own problems. There could be a real run brewing here for this team.
I'm getting inspired here, Ziggy. Listening to that, Zach and I were looking at each other. I felt like I was watching an episode of Ted Lasso when he's banging on the believe sign.
It made me think of the quote. I don't know what movie it's from. It's like, if you can believe, you can achieve.
Yeah, that's a great little speech there from you, Ziggy.
Oh, just real quick, too. The Dolphins now, beat another team over 500.
Yeah. Oh, just keep adding to the list.
We beat a team over 500.
Defrauding the Miami Dolphins right here.
But you also now have a loss to a team that's not over 500. So
that's true.
All right. Well, yeah. I guess it goes both ways. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sitting back here watching the Broncos play, and it's a completely different football team. They showed the graphic at the beginning of the game where the headline was, Sean Payton is coaching this team worse than Nathaniel Hackett, to where we are now, where it's Russell Wilson has the entire locker room believing. And the transformation of really the entire team, from the way we're perceiving Sean Payton to the defense. The Broncos defense last year was fantastic. And this year, giving up 70 points, they were quite literally the laughing stock of the league. Everyone was making fun of them. That unit's playing better, but for me, it's that Russell Wilson is finding, I don't want to call it the fountain of youth per se, but right now, the Russell Wilson you're getting is, he's 13 for 22 for 134 yards, so he's not setting the world on fire. But compared to where he was, he's absolutely playing good enough football to go and make the playoffs, which was unfathomable just a few weeks ago. So you have to give credit to Sean Payton, who, as much as I dislike him, he's just one of the best coaches in the league. And you this is what you were hoping for if you were a Broncos fan.
Yeah, and I think in a certain way, the tough stretch of the Broncos, I think, was a good experience for Russell Wilson and will help this team. Because this Broncos team has an identity. They are physical. They're strong in the trenches. They run the ball. They limit mistakes. And in Seattle, Pete Carroll had a very hard time getting Russell Wilson to play that game, right? Russ wanted to cook, and he could back then. But I think the fact that there were some struggles early on, the fact that he didn't do super well for the Broncos has made Russ more willing to play that style of game. And now you're seeing the results, right? The Browns were, if any team in the NFL we're going to dominate the lines of scrimmage, run the ball, and out physical you, it was the Cleveland Browns. Mm-hmm. And the Broncos dominated the Browns at that game. I get that, like, you've got DTR and PJ Walker at quarterback, but they still won that aspect of the game. The offensive line shut down Myles Garrett. They got a lot of different running backs involved for some success. Russell Wilson made the plays when he needed to. So seeing him willing to play into that identity and the team succeed when they do is the kind of thing that makes me believe, even though the numbers are only giving them a 30% chance at the playoffs, so they can really make a run.
Oh, yeah. And how many teams have been completely shut down by Cleveland, too? We've seen some really good offenses go against the Browns and do absolutely nothing. Think about what would have happened to this Denver team 6 or 7 weeks ago to almost hang 30 on them. I thought that was the most impressive part of the
Christian
game.
McCaffrey had 11 carries for 43 yards against this defense.
Yeah, it was a great performance for Denver, and every single week they look like they're getting a little bit better. So watch out. But here, we'll go on to two more AFC contenders. The Jaguars take down the Texans 24-21. You know, we kind of pull for the Texans just because we started to get along with their fans. We do more and more of their content as it's been doing well on our channel. But here you saw a game where in many ways it might have been the most important one of the day, because Jacksonville right now firmly sits in contention for not just the AFC South, like they'll win the AFC South probably, but the number one overall seed in the AFC, which you mentioned in the offseason, by the way, Ziggy, that they might be able to pull that off. On the other hand, Houston, they go from potentially being in contention for the 1 seed and leading the South to being on the outside looking in of the AFC playoff race. So even though both these teams look like absolute contenders in the AFC, you see it's so tight there right now that losing for Houston puts them out. We can start real quickly for Jacksonville, looking ahead at their schedule, and we always say we don't like to do this, but it's kind of fun to look ahead. They got Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore, the Buccaneers, Panthers, and Titans. You know, everything outside of the Ravens there, they'll probably be favored to win those games. Now, I think Kansas City will still find a way to get that 1 seed, but if Jacksonville's able to get the 1, then you have to say, whether or not you think they're that good or not, if you're the 1 seed and it all goes through you, to me, this game made the Jaguars, again, in contention for the Super Bowl. Whereas if they were a wild card, I think they get knocked out early. But right now, man, if you're a Jaguars fan, what a huge win.
No, I mean, this seeding matters a whole lot. Home field matters a whole lot, especially that 1 seed, you get to take the bye. And here's the thing about this Jaguars team. I think they live and die by which Trevor Lawrence they get. We've sort of seen 2 Trevor Lawrences this season, right? There's a Trevor Lawrence, they'll throw you for 300 plus yards, make the clutch plays, convert and get you the touchdowns. We saw that this game. There's a Trevor Lawrence, they'll throw for 150 and a bunch of interceptions, which we saw against the 49ers. And it's not entirely his fault, right? I'm not saying that it's all on him, but when Trevor Lawrence is locked in, this Jaguars team is good and they're ready to compete. And, you know, they've got the skill players around him. They've got a decent enough offensive line. They've got a decent enough defense. How Trevor Lawrence plays is going to decide the future of this team. If he plays like a superstar, which he did today, you're right, 1 seed playoff run is in contention. If it doesn't, they're going to be yet another AFC South winner that doesn't do anything in the playoffs.
Well, Zach's philosophy on the Jaguars is, go ahead, you can say it, Zach, throw yourself on.
My philosophy on the Jaguars is if Calvin Ridley gets shut down, then they will not win that game. And we've seen it. Or I was talking with Paul.
Basically any game, right?
Yeah, any game you could shut down Calvin Ridley, that the team becomes inept. I don't know what it is, but they just become inept.
So Zach and I were playing in fantasy today, and Zach has Calvin Ridley. And I look over at halftime, 0 targets, 0 receptions, nothing. Complete donut for Calvin. And then as I'm watching this literally one drive, it's like 65 yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. I looked up to Zach. I said, I think he just had a 17-point drive, which you rarely ever see that in fantasy football. But when Calvin Ridley's cooking, Christian Kirk made a couple fantastic catches. You're right, Ziggy. The skill position players on the Jaguars are pretty underrated compared to what you see in the AFC with the Travis Kelce's and you have I was going to say Keenan Allen because I'm looking at the Chargers score right here. But you still have a lot of great players, Stephon Diggs. Jaguars have some really good weapons, and they're going to be a tough out for anyone going forward. I want to turn our attention briefly to the Texans because
I have to say this about the Texans. People are going to focus on this Bills game and sort of forget that there was a heartbreak in Houston today too.
Oh, brutal.
Matt Amendola is their backup kicker, right? Like Kaimi Fairburn, he's been out with an injury, so they bring Matt Amendola in off the street. He misses one 50+ yarder. And then the second one, I think if you weren't watching the games, you won't see this. It's right down the middle. Perfect kick. And then the very last spot on the crossbar it could possibly hit without bouncing in, it hits and just deflects off. You could see it on CJ Stroud's face, right? He saw it and thought for sure it was going in, and then saw it fall just short and looked like he was about to cry.
You could see everyone in Houston when they were showing the replays, and even us at home, we're watching that replay. Zach and I are ruined for the Texans at this point. And he kicks it, and you're like, all right, he's got it, but does it have the distance? And then you hear that boom, and it was, at first I thought it may have bounced up and in, but you see it just hit the ground, and it was like, oh my gosh. But
when you talk about a game of inches, boy, that was 6 inches.
CJ Stroud had a few throws today too.
Boy howdy, we've been waiting for.
Yeah, there's the boy howdy. He had that 65-yard bomb to Tank Dell that got called back, and I was about to text the chat and just say, holy crap, look at that throw from Stroud right there. He still is doing things during games where I just lean back and go, wow, he's like on Trevor Lawrence level. He's on elite quarterback level right now. And you still saw some inexperienced moments. Like on that last drive, there are a couple plays there where you just can't take the sacks that he took. And it's just unacceptable in those moments. Yeah, it was tough to get out of the situations. But one thing that really impressed me was they had the 2nd and 25 on their game-tying drive or attempting the game-tying drive. And a lot of teams in the NFL, like if you had the Jets or the Browns, 2nd and 25 ends your drive. You're done. And they looked more like the Chiefs where 2nd and 25, okay, no big deal. Let's pick up 15, pick up 10, we're moving the sticks. Like their offense is cooking. And on defense, I love Will Anderson. I love watching him play. I believe in the Houston Texans defense with D'Amico Ryans. I think given the schedule that they have going forward, and it is lighter than Jacksonville's, they got Denver, the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, the Titans, and the Colts. I like Houston to get in the playoffs. Not sure if they'll win on the road against a team like Miami. Maybe if they play Jacksonville again, that's a tough game. But I like them to get to the playoffs, and you don't want to play this team, even though they're young, you don't want them in the first round.
No, certainly not. CJ Stroud just became the first rookie quarterback in NFL history to throw for 300 yards in 4 consecutive games. When he's on, and he's always on. I will say a player who I haven't seen getting much attention, which is kind of strange, Derek Stingley Jr. I know people are talking about him being a bust or he had those injuries and it was tough, but he's now got interceptions in back-to-back games. So he's a player in addition to Will Anderson, who's obviously very good to watch out for on that defense. There are so many players on this team that are finding ways to contribute week in, week out. Right?
They might be obviously the most fun team to root for in the NFL right now for any fan base.
Yeah, how many people are either having unexpected career booms or revivals? Devin Singletary came from Buffalo and is now a major contributor to this team.
Oh, I agree. I'm watching Singletary today, and I looked over at Zach and I said, holy crap, he's playing unbelievable right now. It's Singletary, Noah Brown, Nico Collins. Tank Dell has been insane. A couple of his catches are just crazy every single week, it seems. I don't know if there's a team I'd rather be a fan of right now than the Houston Texans, both for this season and moving forward.
And there's going to be some great games for the Texans coming up to watch because you talk about that last seed in the AFC playoff picture.
Yep.
There are 3 teams tied at 6-5. The Texans, the Broncos, and the Colts. Texans play the Broncos. They play the Colts. They also play the Browns.
Yes.
So they're going to be playing a lot of those teams that are in that bubble playoff picture. So they really get to decide their own destiny from here.
And you get the Denver game at home. You get the Cleveland game at home. You do go to Indy at the end of the year. But to be able to control your fate, like they do, and get 2 of those 3 games in Houston is a big deal, especially because I think if you could pick 2 of the 3 to be at home, you would want Denver, you would want Cleveland, and you'd choose to go on the road to Indianapolis, which is always going to be tough as a division game no matter what. So I like where Houston is at right now. I think they're better than Denver. I think they're better than Cleveland. I think they're better than Pittsburgh. So they're in a good spot, even though today was a really tough pill to swallow. It's just, Jacksonville showed up today.
I mean, you told the Texans at the start of the season that week 11 they're going to have split with the Jaguars and to be in the playoffs.
And control their destiny.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's been a great season, but you can't. And I think this is what I like about the Texans team. They're not sitting back and thinking, boy, we're ahead of schedule. We can take it easy. They're coming out every week. They're playing hard. They're ignoring whatever the narratives are.
Oh, we flipped the switch. A couple weeks ago, we flipped the switch in Houston from this is a fairy tale season to, hey, let's go win a playoff game. Let's not just get in. Let's try and win a playoff game.
If they don't make the playoffs and they don't win a playoff game, I think they will feel disappointed.
The fan base will be okay with it. I think the fan base is hoping for the playoffs and a win right now. You have to be proud of, no matter what happens at this point, you're proud of this season. But yeah, now you're starting to be like, okay, we could be bummed out if we don't get in because you're good enough. You're actually good enough. Look at all these teams right. We'll talk about the Steelers right now as well. Look at all these teams who are in the wild card spots right now. It's the Browns, the Steelers, and the Colts. I think Houston's better than all 3 of those teams. Do you?
Probably. I mean, how could you not say that? They've got a consistent offense and a consistent defense.
I think the Texans, Bills, and Broncos, who are all on the outside looking in, are all better than the current wildcard teams, which is funny. It's just that's the way the AFC's been this year. Let's do our final game here. Steelers take down the Bengals 16-10. It's really funny how in the first game without Matt Canada, who Steelers fans have been calling all season to be fired, they're chanting it at Penguins games, fire Canada. And Mike Sullivan finally takes over today. First play of the game, 25-yard strike right down the seam. And throughout the entire day, you're seeing a more aggressive Pittsburgh Steelers team. Kenny Pickett looking good on some deep throws. He had a beautiful one down the near sideline to George Pickens later in the game. Pittsburgh finishes with 421 yards of offense, and you're going to see this all over the place. But they had gone 58 straight games without 400 or more yards, total yards in the game. Canada was with them for 44 games. Not one time did they achieve that feat. You have to go back to 2020, week 2. To when the Steelers offense put up these kind of numbers. So there's a large portion of the Steeler fan base that's saying, yeah, you see, Mike, if you just listened to us, a year ago, maybe we would be in a better position than we're in right now. But you have to be happy to see that the Steelers, with whatever they were doing today, they established a running game. Najee and Jalen Warren combined for 148 yards, and they got Pat Freiermuth going. He ended the day with 9 catches for 120 yards. That's how you help these young quarterbacks. Get their tight ends involved. Establish a run. And for Pittsburgh, it was a great sight to see because they are still in playoff contention. And if their offense gets going, their defense makes enough plays where, maybe they can make a little bit of noise.
And just to put that number into perspective, right? Maybe you think, 400 yards, isn't that a lot? Since that streak started, there were 333 instances where teams went over 400 yards. He said the Steelers streak was broken at 48. The next longest, or now the longest, is the Packers at 18.
Yeah,
so this was
close.
Yeah, no, it was unprecedented in modern NFL history how bad the Steelers offense was. And the people who say that coaching doesn't matter, it's all about the players. You can sort of put people in whatever scheme. It doesn't matter what the coaches are doing. I think this serves as a counterexample today.
Oh, completely. Look at Pat Freiermuth. His yardage in the previous 5 games he played, yards, not catches here. 3 yards, 2 yards, 41 yards, 7 and 7. I mean, the guy didn't exist, and he's a talented tight end. He had 120 yards today. It was I didn't want to ever jump on Matt Canada too hard to kick a guy when he's down, but it is pretty telling to see, okay, he's gone for 1 game and they explode for 420 when the offense still has plenty of problems. Don't get me wrong. There's still a lot to fix in Pittsburgh, but today was a good step forward. I still don't know if I really believe in Kenny Pickett as a guy who can take you far. But maybe now when you have a new guy in the building, we're going to see a different Kenny Pickett. So, yeah.
I mean, look, here's the thing, right? What Steelers fans have been asking from the offense isn't for them to carry the team. The defense is good. And the run game is pretty decent, too. You've got the players to make things work. What you need is an offense that is good enough to let players like TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and let those guys go to work.
You literally need the offense to be acceptable. It's like Denver last year. If the offense scores 20 points, yeah, we just talked about it. They win double-digit games. Just be acceptable. You can't get 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. This version of the Steelers offense probably goes in and takes care of Cleveland a lot easier last week. So
yeah, but I mean, here's the thing, right? This team's 7-4 now, right? If they are starting to figure out having an okay offense, I don't mean great, I mean an okay offense that can keep them in games. They've got a pretty easy schedule left. They just have to play at 500 level to make the playoffs. And then who knows? The division is still sort of within reach. If you don't win the division, you're going on the road of a ferocious defense and a quarterback that can occasionally put some plays together. I mean, that's scary.
The Steelers can 100% win the AFC North. The next 4 weeks, they have Arizona, New England, Indianapolis, and Cincinnati. They should win all of those games. They really should be 4-0 and be 11-4. And let's see where Baltimore will be at that point. Baltimore, let's say they win tonight, they'll be 9-3, right?
Yeah, but then they got the Rams, they got the Jaguars, the 49ers, the Dolphins at home. So it's not a game, but here's my prediction. Week 18, the Steelers travel to Baltimore. Because the Steelers won the first game, if they win that, they'll have the tiebreaker. I think that game will decide the AFC North. And I'll tell you, I am sure that the Ravens will not be happy having to play what could be deciding the 1 seed versus the 5 seed or the 2 seed versus the 6 seed in week 17. Lamar Jackson is getting no rest for that one.
Look, let's just say that the Steelers win those 4 games, which they should. If they win those 4 games, the Ravens now have to, they could lose to Jacksonville, 49ers, or the Dolphins. If they lose 2 of those 3, the Steelers are looking at a closeout division game in week 17 against the Seahawks, which would be kind of nuts if that wound up being the scenario here. Yeah, they're a weird team this year. They remind me in some ways, like I said, of the Vikings last year, where they just figure it out. Not as spectacularly, but Pittsburgh sits here and, 7-4. They the 1 seed is even in play. To some degree, the 1 seed is in play. It's unfathomable, but it's real. There is a world where it could happen.
Yeah, ever since that game where the Texans blew up and put up 30 points on the Steelers, since then, their next 7 games, the Steelers have only given up an average of 15 points per game against some good offenses, right? The Jaguars, the Ravens. They've done that against decent enough teams. If you have an offense that can put up 300 plus points or 300 plus yards,
that would be huge.
Oh yeah, no. If Kenny Pickett puts up 300 points next week, game over. But you got an offense that can put up 300 or more yards, a defense that can hold your opponents under 20. That is a winning formula.
Crazy here. And let's just wrap up the show. We'll go back just for a second to the Thanksgiving games, where not all of them. We're just going to hit the Packers and Detroit here, because I'm starting to have people say to me that they think the Packers are going to the playoffs. And at first, you hear that and you go like, oh, okay, sure. But then you look a little bit more into the weeds here. And in the NFC, the Vikings sit at 6-5. Seahawks sit at 6-5. That's your 6 and 7 seeds. And right behind them, the 8 seeds, somehow, after all this time, are Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers at 5-6. And it's almost unbelievable that they've gotten to this point here. But since Gutekunst called out Jordan Love, he's been really good. He's getting better every single week. And he owned Detroit. That game it ended 29-22, but that game was not close. Jordan Love looked awesome. Packers go in and beat up, NFC North leader, what a lot of people are starting to call a conference favorite almost, with the Lions right up there with the Eagles and 49ers. It was a humbling game for Detroit, but Green Bay, their schedule the remainder of the year, they're probably going to lose against Kansas City next week. You have to imagine. But then they got the Giants, the Bucks, the Panthers, They go to Minnesota, and they play the Bears. So you're hoping, if you're a Packer fan, for probably 4-2 there. And I think Seattle, who has Dallas and San Francisco, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, I think that Green Bay's in a better spot to make the playoffs than Seattle right now, which is, again, crazy to think about where we were a few weeks ago. But with this version of Jordan Love, when he's on, there are certain guys. You watch Kenny Pickett play, and you watch a rookie, watch DTR. Like, they don't really have the attributes you say where you're like, okay, they can make all the throws. Jordan Love, when he's on, he's got the stature of, what could be an elite quarterback. He can make all the different arm angles. When he's on, he's awesome. It's just, can we get that consistently? We haven't seen that this year. But if he gets hot at the right time, watch out. We could be looking at a Lambeau wildcard berth. I hope not. I really hope not. But crazy enough that. What do you think right now, Ziggy? You feeling you feeling it in Green Bay?
The most important thing to do in the McVay offensive scheme that LaFleur is running is being able to hit throws over the middle of the field. And Jordan Love has done an excellent job of that recently. During his past 4 games, he's 45 of 59. He's getting 10.2 yards per attempt on those throws. Put that in perspective, Brock Purdy, who's leading the NFL in yards per attempt, is getting 9.5 yards per attempt on his throws. So Jordan Love is doing really well at the critical throws. So if he's figured that out, right, and 4 games is enough of a sample size that I'm willing to start to believe. If he can just figure that out and keep it, then yeah, he can start making the throws the offense needs him to make. He can be accurate. He can deliver the ball where he needs to. And that's going to unlock those deep shots that the Packers have been unsuccessfully taking all season long.
I give Jordan Love a lot of credit because people were coming for his throat over the past month and a half. And, including us, we were very patient, more patient than most people. And finally, I can't remember which game it was where we just sat back and were going, okay, if things don't start to change now, we know he has the season, and we stressed that the entire time. You have to give him the entire season because that's what you signed up for. You know it's his first year starting. There will be ups and downs. There comes a point where you say, all right, now we really have to start paying attention here, and if we don't see progress, we're going to have to make a move. Well, Jordan Love brought that about as close to the line as you can to saying, wow, we're going to have to make a move before flipping the switch. And he's been everything you could have hoped for over the past few weeks here. Hosting Kansas City on Sunday Night Football, I believe it's Sunday Night Football, next week in Green Bay. If they find a way to win that game against a Chiefs team that's been struggling, the tone coming out of Green Bay is going to be very, very different. And then, now you're talking about a team that's going to expect to make the playoffs.
I think that's a little bit too much. It's tough for me to see him.
Oh, beating
they're not beating Kansas City.
Oh, I doubt it, but
no. But the good thing for the Packers.
Bay?
So yeah, I get that it's possible, but the thing is, at 5-6, they don't have to do this. Realistically, there's only let's say they lose this game, they are still fine for the playoffs for the following reason: they play the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, enough of that.
No, I'm not saying we're going to lose. Here's what I'm saying. Right, games against the Giants and the Panthers and the Buccaneers, you can sort of pencil those in.
Well, no,
in the NFC, yeah, sure. Let's just we can assume they win those, right? If you look the NFC playoff picture, what team are you really worried about as you're sort of on the bubble trying to get that 7 seed? It's the Minnesota Vikings, right? As we've been talking about, right? The Seahawks are sort of around there, but they're fading. The Rams and the Saints aren't super interesting. The Cowboys have that 5 seed locked up. So it's right in that 6-7 spot. You don't get to play the Seahawks, but they do get to play one of those 2 or 3 teams that's in that bubble spot. So the fact that they get to do that, if they can win that game, they're going to the playoffs. If they can't win that game, they won't. That's the game of the season.
I'm expecting Seattle to fade over the next 3 weeks, big time. And then you're going to have a race between the Packers and the Rams for that. I think the Vikings will get in as the 6. And then you're going to have a race for between the Rams and Green Bay for the 7. Let's finish this up here. We got one final topic here, and then we'll get out of here. I just want to say real quick, I'm getting a little concerned with the Detroit Lions. And I know that Lions fans aren't going to want to hear that, but over the past 2 weeks, you kind of got dominated by Chicago and Green Bay. You were fortunate to come back in that Bears game over the final 4:30, but Green Bay really annihilated you. And when you go to New Orleans and then you go to Chicago, who just took you to the wire, you have Denver, the Vikings, Cowboys. That schedule there is looking a little tougher than it did just a couple weeks ago. And I think Detroit is fine for getting into the playoffs. They should win enough of those games to be just fine. They'll probably win the NFC North too. But Jared Goff for 2 weeks in a row has had 3 turnovers. And when you get pressure on him, you're starting to see him make some mistakes. And we've said the entire year here, we think Detroit's really good. But we don't really, or at least I don't trust Jared Goff to always be good. And when you get the bad Jared Goff, when he's turning the ball over, this Detroit team is very, very different. And the Green Bay pressured him on 26 of his dropbacks, and that's when we saw all 3 of his fumbles come, when they pressured him here. So next week, you go to you go to New Orleans, that's a big game. They win that game, you're like, okay, let's get back on track here, take care of business in Chicago. But if you lose now, and the Vikings are able to win tomorrow night against the Bears, wow, we're starting to talk about a real race here in the NFC North where we didn't expect that just, a week ago.
So, yeah, here's the thing, right? Jared Goff is a good player. He's a very good quarterback, but he doesn't possess the rare ability of guys like Mahomes and Allen to just will you through turnovers, right? Josh Allen, it almost doesn't matter how many turnovers he has because he's going to answer his next turnover of some insane touchdown drive most of the time. Jared Goff is not that guy. So you need to create a system around him where he's not asked to do too much. He can do plenty, but where he's not asked to create things that help you overcome big disadvantages. This usually isn't a problem, and usually it works out fine in Detroit. But it means that when you've got a game where your quarterback's putting up a bunch of turnovers, you need miracles in Detroit to win.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I'm not too worried about it because we've seen the body of work over his time there of Ben Johnson. We've seen that they've created an offensive system where Jared Goff's usually asked to do just the right amount, where he gets to show off his skills and produce a lot, but isn't putting the ball at risk. So I think they're going to regress back to the mean, which I guess is progression back to the mean and be just fine.
And let's see how Dan Campbell responds to this too. Because Dan Campbell is such a positive guy. We like him on this show. A lot of people don't. His aggression sometimes doesn't pay off, like going for it, the fake punt against the Packers. Not a good call in hindsight, but when it works out, you're like, so brave. So like the balls that this guy has to go for it. Now we're going to see just how good of a coach he is, where you're starting to feel a little bit of pressure. Still got a great record. But these next 6 games are important. Let's see how Dan Campbell stacks up against a couple really good coaches in the league.
The next 6 games are important, and I agree. But what this is going to stick in my head until the playoffs for the following reason. The Lions, the goal is not to make the playoffs anymore. The goal is to win playoff games and go on a run, right? And you talked about how Jared Goff under pressure, that creates difficulties for him. You look at the 3 best teams in the NFC, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the 49ers. Those are 3 of the most fearsome defensive lines in the entire NFL, with creative coaches that scheme guys ways to get to the quarterback. I'm not worried about the Lions for the rest of the regular season, but if you're talking about making a playoff run, whether you're hosting or going to Philadelphia or San Francisco, I am worried about this Lions team to compete with those teams if that's what they have to do.
I can't wait to see what Brian Flores does against them. I think that's going to be those are going to be great matchups towards the end of the season. But okay, we got Union Zack working in the morning, so we're going to wrap up this episode right here. Thanks again for listening to the Week 12 reaction show. We'll be back with Jack next time. Please remember to like this video, comment on the video, subscribe to our channel. We're chasing down 2,000. We're almost there. So we appreciate everyone who listens to us and gives feedback. And we will see you probably with a little more Week 12 reaction content later this week.